Hi there, welcome to another Axes and O's video. This one looks at the input events. I did a video about this the other day. We're going to cover the same ground in this one, looking at the input events using the same helicopter that I used in a previous video, but this one is aimed at the X-Touch rather than the Stream Deck. So I'll look at some of the differences there, but I'm going to cover the same ground. So if you haven't got a Stream Deck, you don't need to go and look at that video if you're looking for the X-Touch command. If you've used Axes and O's before, then you'll know that we could and should read the local variables from the sim, and there was the option here to read the H variables and the B variables, and we're not really supposed to use those anymore. They still exist, you can still use them if you know how to use them, and anything you've programmed in using them before will carry on working. They haven't been taken away, it's just there's a different way of working these input events. In fact, if you look here on the extras menu, you can see we've still got this mapping B vars and L vars, but we've been told not to use them. It's just there so that if you have worked in that way and you need to go back and look at work you've done before, we can do that. Okay, let's get into the cockpit and have a look around at the helicopter, and I'll show you what I'm going to cover. So what I want to do is to cover this switch panel here and make sure all those switches are working. On the end of this lever here, the collective lever, if I can swing my view around a little bit, on the end here there are two buttons. One is a push button to start the engine, and the other is a toggle switch, and you can see it labelled governor, so I'll be working with those. Between the seats on the back panel here, that's where the fuel valve is, so we'll deal with that one there. And up in the on the ceiling we've got the magneto switches, and there's a mixture switch there, so we'll get those working as well. So back here, this is where we're going to start our journey, and I'm going to bring up a webcam up the top here so you can see which buttons I press on my actual X-Touch, so you'll know what's going on there. I've already allocated to these axes here the collective and the throttle and the mixture. So that's the collective switch there. There's the throttle, you can see turning, and you've seen the mixture already up on the ceiling. Just a little sort of warning for this one here: when you allocate them, the usual thing to do, select the axis and find the command that you're looking for, and it's the helicopter collective here that we're putting in. Move the throttle so it identifies which one you're moving. It will assume that the axis starts at 0 and goes up to 16,000. If you use that, you'll lose the first 50%. You'll find that the collective lever effectively starts halfway up, so you need to make it symmetrical around the 0 point. So you double click on here and type in that value there, 16,383, and click on save, and that will work. Exactly the same with the throttle. It will assume you're starting at 0, and you're not. You need to start at minus 16,000. And we have a different problem with the mixture, that when you look at that, it will start at -1. It assumes that this one is symmetrical around 0, and it's not. It should start from 0. So again, double click and type in the 0 and that one there. So that's it for that one. So let's go back and look at this switchboard here. So what I want to do is, if I was going to start this as a beginner, I would make sure my tooltips are turned on. So you can see straight away this is saying master, but when I point at it, it's giving me the clue it actually means battery. I would watch the simulator events, and you can see there's something happening already straight at the beginning. We can just ignore that, so we click on ignore spam. Spam is anything that's sort of triggering more than 20 or 30 times. That can go. If there's stuff in the list, clear that list so that we can really focus on the changes that we're going to make by clicking on this switch here. And you can see that it's looks like it's done 2 commands, but in fact it's this one it's doing. It's sending one of these new input events to the battery, and that triggers the older legacy version, the key event. I'm going to continue using that one because I've got lots of profiles already programmed in using it, and it still works. You need to be a bit careful because sometimes these input events trigger more than one other event. Some you can see, and some are sort of hidden processes behind the scenes. So if you're using the old ones and there is a new one, just double check that there's nothing else that's untoward, there's something not happening because you haven't used all of the command. But this one here, I guarantee, absolutely perfectly safe. So to make that allocation, click on the plus sign here, and I'm going to narrow this down looking for the battery because I've been given the clue that it's to do with the battery. And I'm looking for a toggle event, so that first time you click on the button it will turn it on, click again it turns it off. You can reprogram these to become toggles in their own right rather than events. I really wouldn't recommend it because then if you change aircraft, that whole thing will be wrong. Let Axis and O's do the work for you. Most of them will have toggles built into them, and if they haven't, I'm going to show you how to make a toggle command out of an ordinary command anyway. So we're going to toggle this master battery, so double click on there, press this button here, and you'll see it's detected which device, which button. Just click add, and away it goes. Same with the strobe. I don't even really need to look at the events for the strobe. It's they're been around, every aircraft has got them. So we just hunt it down, filter down, looking for a strobe, and there's the toggle version. Double click, allocate it, add, and just test it, just check it out, and that's working. Pumps, I usually do watch the events for that. Some of them use slightly different versions of the pump command, but this one is the electric fuel pump set. So again, we'll just filter down looking for the pump. And I want to toggle the electric fuel pump. Now there is the pump 1, but I'm going to use this one here because that one is sort of a cover-all, a catch-all. It will toggle all the fuel pumps, but there is only one in this one. But we can go ahead with that. Done. Add. And just check we're right, and we are. And the last one here is the alternator. And we're going to toggle the master alternator for this one. And that works. So now we come to kind of the first unusual, interesting switch. And this one here is the clutch. It's the connection between the engine and the rotor. We don't want it connected when we're trying to start the engine and getting up to speed, but once we're up to speed with the engine, we then connect the two together. For safety, we don't want to disconnect it when we're flying, so we've got a cover over the switch, and so we have to flip the cover up to access the switch. So let's flip the cover, and watching the event, we can see it's only an input event, there's nothing else. So there's no toggle, and if we watch what happens, it sends a 1 to it when it's open and a 0 when it's closed. And to make the toggle work, we need to be able to see the variable that's controlling it. So if we watch the simulator variables, I'm going to select a variable and look for the cover variable. And as you go through looking here, there isn't one. It's not happened yet. If we go back and look at those the events, it appears that there's a variable here that is then connecting to that, but it's not in our list yet. Let's bring that to the front. If we type in the variable, actually manually type it in, so it's an IE variable, and we literally just type this in here. I'm going to get the capitalization absolutely right. Engine, clutch, 1, cover. And if we add that in, when we flip this lever up and down, we can see that there's the variable and it's definitely working. So we have got access to it, and as far as I can see, I've looked at lots of these input events, that the variable controlling it is named identically. So if you can't find it, you'll certainly find the event. You can then create the variable and use it. So how would we write it into the script? So if we open the script editor here, well, we'll look for the sim variable here just in case. So we'll look for the cover here. And now it's available to us. We've used it, we can see it. So we can just double click and pop that in here. What I want to happen is I want it to read the state of the cover, and if it's open, I want it to send a close to it. If it's closed, I want to send it open. And we saw that that was a 0 for closed and a 1 for open. So what I want to do is to, if it's 0, flip it over to become a 1. That dot there is where I've pressed the space bar. You can't type a dot, you just type the space bar and it puts a marker to show there's a space there. And if I put an exclamation mark, that is a logical not. It changes 0s to 1s and 1s to 0s. So if it was closed, if it was 0, it would change it to a 1 and then send it to the event. So again, I'm going to narrow it down for cover, and it's one of these input events. It's a Microsoft input event, clutch cover, double click and it's in. It gives us this 1 automatically, which we don't really want, so we'll get that out. We'll get rid of that and the extra space. So reading from left to right, that says open the clutch cover, or check the clutch cover is open. If it's not, if it's a 0, flip it over and send a 1 to it. That makes it open. If it's open, if that's 1, flip it over, turn it to a 0, and that little arrow there says send it to the into the command. And I can show you that working just by clicking on test, and you can see it's open and now it's closed. And if we're watching the variable, you'd see it go from 1 to 0. So that's how I would flip that. To do the switch that's inside it, again, we'd find the event. So if we watch the simulator event, and the IE one is the engine clutch one, and that's what the switch is called. And you can see that's a 0 now because it's off, and a 1 now it's on. So we could write a toggle for that quite easily. And so we could have it so that we've got 2 different buttons, one for the clutch cover and one for the actual switch itself, to emulate the 2 actions that you need to do to make it work. There isn't actually any connection between the 2 programs, so it is actually possible to keep the cover closed and use a command, and it would move the switch underneath the cover, which is a bit of a shame. You can get around it by doing if statements. If cover is closed or open, you can check on that. But I really want to have it all allocated to a single button that I can press and make it happen. So what I've done is I've written a slightly more complicated script for the clutch, which I'll just talk you through it and show you what happens. Firstly, it sends a 1 to open the clutch cover. It waits half a second, and then it does the toggling. It looks at the clutch switch. If it's off, it turns it to on and sends it. If it's on, flip it and send it to off. So there's the toggle for the clutch. And then wait half a second and then close the cover again. So let's close it down, make sure, get it back to sort of default, and I'll show you it working. If I click on test here, opens the cover, flips the switch. Now, same command, exactly the same command. Click on there, and you can see it's turned the clutch switch off. Okay, so I'll work with that. I'm quite happy with that. So that particular script I've written, it's in a script group. I've made a group for this one aircraft. It's in there, and I've called it my Cabri. So I know I haven't downloaded it from anywhere else. I've written this script. I've made that work. So what I want to do now is to allocate that. So let's close that down and allocate that to a button. So it's a key down event, and if I just filter here for my stuff, this is the script I've written for this aircraft, and it's this one here, my clutch. Allocate it to the button, click on add, and every time I press the button you can see that it's flipping the switch and flipping the cover up. Absolutely working fine. So now we'll move on to the nav lights, and again they've been around for a long while, so there'll be a legacy command for that one. So we just need to go and hunt it down. So in lights there'll be something for nav, and there's the nav lights toggle. Allocate that, and the landing lights will be exactly the same. So again, just filter down for landing or land. In lights, landing lights toggle. Okay, we're now on to another interesting button. This one is interesting because it's the carb heat, or anti-ice as they call it here, and it's got 3 positions. It's got cold, off, automatic, and hot. And the weird thing about it, if I clear that list, when it's in auto mode it's a 1. When it's hot, it's a 0. And when it's cold, off, it's a 2. So it's sort of not the binary logic you would expect. You kind of expect 0 to be off, 1 to be on, and 2 to be really on. It works, but it's not how I would have programmed it. Anyway, we need a script then to make that work, this 3 position one, and I've written the script, so I will talk you through this script. If you really need to know how the script works, I've done a whole video on that, and I'll put a link in the description so you can see an in-depth view, but I'll just talk you through very briefly what it does. This is the function here. It's a sequence function, and what it does, it sets through this sequence. Every time you press, it looks for a match. What position am I in now? I'm in position 2, so the next thing I should do is a 1, and then it'll look, next time you press it, it'll say, oh, I'm a 1, I'll be a 0 next, then I'll be a 1. So it goes round and round that cycle. The problem you've got with that sequence is that if it's looking for a 1, it'll start here and it'll find that 1 here and go to 0. It'll never get beyond that, because every time it looks, it'll keep finding that 1 and never move on. So it's got this extra command here of having an index, so it knew where it got last time and start looking from that position there and working its way along. So what it does is it looks here, what's the condition I'm in, that's the variable, matches it against here, gets the next one and sends it into the command, and it also gets the index, moves the index along by one and writes it into here. So these ones here you have to spell exactly as the variable is, which is this de-ice engine 1, and it's got to be capitalized the same. This one here you can call what you like. It's an ELV, a local variable you've created, and I've called it de-ice, and that's short for index. It mustn't clash with any other variable that's around, and I'm pretty sure nobody's going to use that. If you wanted to call it something more obvious like de-ice index, that'll be fine. As long as you keep these two the same, it makes no difference. And I can show you that working again by pressing the test button here, and you'll see the switch going through its different phases. There's it hot, into auto, down to cold, and it just steps through that sequence every time you press it. So we allocate that as we did before. We'll do the search for my, because it's in my scripts, it's my one here, the de-ice indexed sequence, the indexed sequence, and we allocate it to the carb button here, click add, and we just check out that it goes through all the sequence, and it does. So that's really good. Right, where are we going next? Well, we've got the fuel switch to look at next, which is here on the back, and again it's worth looking at the event just to see how that one's working. And it's toggling the fuel cutoff. We might as well well, we can use that toggle one there, that'll do, that'll be fine, we can do that. So I'm going to search for the valve, a fuel cutoff valve, and we'll toggle fuel valve 1. That seems to be okay, we'll go with that. Allocate that to the fuel, and then we're just checking it out, that's working fine, and it is. Okay, now the magnetos. Let's get up to look at the magnetos. Now if we watch the events for the magneto, it looks like we've got a magneto set here that we can use, and we've also got the new input event, and I've tested this one and it doesn't really work properly, so we are going to have to use this one here, and we want to create a toggle for it. So if we look in the script editor here, I have already written a toggle for the magneto, and I'll talk you through how this works. It looks at the variable that we've got, and again it does that flipping thing that we did with the cover before. If it's off, if it's a 0, flip it to a 1 using the not, and then write it back into the magneto, into the command. If it's 1, flip it to a 0 and switch it off. So again, I can show you that working. If we click on the test button here, magneto's on, magneto off, and exactly the same for the plasma. So again, there's the command, the engine plasma 1 being toggled, and that's working. So allocating those two buttons is now pretty trivial, I think. So it's in the my section, and I'm going to do the magneto first, so double click on that, add that to magneto, and add, and we'll do the same for the plasma. And that's just to double check that they work, but I'm fairly confident they do. That's fine. Next one is the start button. Now there's no toggle for that. You saw on the end it was just a simple press. So I'm just going to check out the input events. Don't need to worry about it being a toggle. Just allocate that. And I really ought to go down and just check out the start switch on the end of that, which is hidden behind everything here. Let's close them down. We'll always open them up later. Right, let's swing the view around a little bit. There it is. So if I press the start button now, you can see the button here definitely moving. Okay, while we're here, we ought to watch what's happening with the governor switch. So we'll watch the simulator events. When I flip that governor, let's clear that and ignore the spam. Now the governor does actually trigger two events, one for governor switch 1 and governor switch 2. They're connected together, so we are going to have to do some work on that to make that work. They're off and they're both on, so they both go on and off together, which is handy. So guess what, I have written the script. And it's the governor toggle, and it's really simple. It's just two versions of that governor switch toggle, and write it back in, one for switch 1 and one for switch 2. So not a difficult one to write, and allocate. So as before, we'll just go into the my section, apply the filter. My script there for the governor toggle. Okay, the last command is the rotor brake, which is up here. The idea behind that is it's a mechanical friction brake. When you finish flying and you switch the engine off, the rotors will still, you've disconnected them from the clutch, but the rotors will want to continue under their own inertia for quite some time. So we can pull this handle here and it'll brake. If I just let go of the handle, it goes back. Whatever event you give it, however you do it, it sort of gives one shot, pulls the brake back and then lets it go. So let's have a look and I'll explain how this works. I'm just going to allocate the rotor. So if we apply the filter using one of these new events, there's the engine rotor brake. Click, it's allocated, and click add. So if I press the button once, it just pulses up and then drops back, so it doesn't actually apply much friction to it. We want that to be a bit more continuous, like you're holding it in your hand. So if we go back into here and turn the repeat on, now when I hold that button in, you can see that it's held, and that will be enough to sort of bring it to a halt and then let go. So that's actually quite an improvement over how it's designed to work. So there's the rotor brake. Right, that's it. So everything's allocated. A bit of icing on the cake. It'd be quite nice to have these light up to show whether the strobe is switched on or not. So in the scripting area here, I've written an LED script. Now I've got lots of different videos about how this script works, but I'll just talk you through it pretty quickly to tell you what's going on. So we're writing the LEDs. What it does is, this is the command that says take whatever number is in here. So if it's a 0 because it's off, take that number and send it over MIDI to device number 7, and you send this command So it sends a 0 to here. This one here, the 0 is the bulb number. That's bulb 0, bulb 1, 2, 3, up to 7 here, 8 to 15 here. Okay, so we're sending over MIDI to device number 7. Now you need to know which device you're talking to. And in your hardware section, you've got this MIDI devices enabled, and you wanted to show the MIDI devices, and you can see here that my X-Touch Mini, if I send it on the MIDI out, it's MIDI device number 7. Yours may be different, so you need to check that out. So let's go back into that script again. So we'll look at the script that I have written for this aircraft. Look at the master battery. If it's a 0, sending a 0 to the MIDI to device number 7. It's as if you've pressed a musical note. It's because MIDI is a musical interface. So the command is a note on. We send it over channel 1. Every single message is always sent over channel 1. Every device is listening on channel 1. It only hears it if the ID numbers match. So send it over channel 1 to bulb 0. This one here is the strobe light. So there's the that's the variable we're looking for, the light strobe. And if it's a 0 it's being sent, it'll switch that bulb off. If it's a 1, it'll switch it on. There's the General Electric fuel pump switch. Make sure you're looking at the switch. There is another variable which is just up to fuel pump, and that will only come on if you've got both the switch on and there's electricity flowing to it. This one here just checks the position of the switch, whether the battery's on or not. So that's the one I use, and we send that over MIDI to bulb 2. There's the alternator. Just as a quick aside, if I show you how I put those in, let's go for the alternator so you can see what's going on here. This one here is the variable for it, and you can see that it's got the word index there. If I double click on it, it pastes it into where the cursor was. But it will have the word index there, and you need to change that word index to the number of the alternator or the number of the switch that you're looking for. In our case it's a 1, so if you see an index there, replace it with 1 on here. There's the clutch. Is the clutch on or off? And send that to bulb number 4. Bulb number 5 is the nav, light landing. This is the 3-way switch. Remember I said that it's kind of defined the logic that if it's off, it's 2, and if it's on, you know, it was all the wrong way around. So this here asks, is it off? So we've got the variable, comparing it to 0. That means it's in the hot position. This equals says, that's the comparison. So these are the two things, compare those two together, and if it's true, if it's in the hot position, I want you to send a 2 to that bulb. If it's in the automatic position, send a 1 to that bulb. And if it's on, sorry, if it's off, cold is 2, send a 0. So it's off when it's cold, it's on when it's in the automatic position, and it's flashing. The 2 means flash, and I'll demonstrate that in a minute. Flash if it's hot. So that's what I've done with those there, and the rest of them are just pretty straightforward really. If the fuel cutoff is off, turn the bulb off. If it's on, turn the bulb on. Magneto, plasma, starter, governor, and the rotor. Well, the rotor's causing me a bit of a problem. It's not really lighting up properly. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. But I've left it in there, and I'm going to work that out. Now that script isn't running, it's not doing anything, nothing's triggering that script. To make the script run, we need to go into this aircraft automated scripts area and find it. So it's in my Cabri G2, and the script is the LED script. Add that, and it says it's repeating. And you can see it's running already. The fuel switch was left on and the lights lit up. If I click on the master button, let's again change the cockpit view here. If I turn the master on, the master lights up here. If I do the pump, that works. Let's do the clutch switch. This one takes a bit of a delay because it has to open the cover first of all. So there's a tiny bit of delay on that one. Here's the carb heat one. So it's off at the moment. Now it's in automatic. Now it's in hot, so it's going to flash and tell me I've left the hot on. Back to automatic, back to off. And I said I've got problems with the rotor brake. If I turn the governor on, that's okay. If I press the rotor brake, it kind of flickers and then that's it. It's not really happening. The start button's an interesting one. If I press the start, it goes on, stays on for about 5 seconds while it's doing the start procedure and then switches itself off. So that's all working fine. So really that's everything I wanted to show you about the buttons with the X-Touch. I've shown you using legacy commands, I've shown you using the new input events and how to turn those into toggles, how to combine them together so that if you want something complex like the clutch with the cover, you can do that. A 3-way switch and the LED script to make them all work. So we've covered a lot of ground, so I hope you stayed with it and I hope it's been useful.